crises are genuinely scary times for most people. People can lose their jobs, companies can go bankrupt, currencies can rapidly lose value, and markets can completely shift direction overnight. In fact, that's usually exactly how the picture looks. But there is a very interesting fact about economic crises. Not everything loses value during a crisis. In fact, some things become even more valuable during crisis periods than before. When we look at major crises throughout history, we can see this very clearly. The Great Depression of 1929, the 2008 financial crisis, or the recent pandemic era. During these times, some people experienced massive losses, but you might have noticed that brand new wealthy people emerged precisely during these periods. The reason for this definitely wasn't luck. The sole reason was that these people knew exactly which assets stay strong during crisis periods. Today in this video, we will talk about 10 things that gain value or whose demand never drops during economic crises. But before we start, I want to drop a quick note. This video is absolutely not financial advice. Our only goal here is to better understand how economic crises work behind the scenes. If you are ready, let's begin. 1. Gold is one of the oldest and most reliable stores of value in human history. For thousands of years, people have always stored their wealth in gold, and there are a few important reasons for this. First, gold is a finite resource. It's not easy to produce at all. New gold production requires rigorous mining and is quite costly. Therefore, the gold supply in the market is not unlimited. The second reason is that gold has a universally accepted value worldwide. A country's own currency might melt away during a crisis, but gold is an international asset. That's why, when economic uncertainty rises, many investors instinctively turn to gold. We saw this very clearly during the 2008 financial crisis. When banks started to fail and markets crashed, the price of gold skyrocketed. A similar situation occurred during the pandemic. When uncertainty rises, people look for a safe haven, and gold is almost always at the top of the list of these safe havens. 2. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Another type of asset frequently mentioned alongside economic crises in recent years is cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin in particular has started to be seen by many as digital gold. One of the most important features of Bitcoin is that, just like gold, it has a limited supply. The total number of Bitcoins that can ever be produced is capped at 21 million. This situation causes some investors to view Bitcoin as a strong hedge against inflation. In the traditional system, central banks can print unbacked money whenever they want, but such a thing is out of the question in Bitcoin's system. Because of this, some people might prefer to shift their money into cryptocurrencies during times of economic uncertainty. Especially among young investors, interest in the cryptocurrency market has increased significantly in recent years. However, there is a very important point here. The cryptocurrency market is highly volatile, so during crisis periods it can sometimes make record highs, but sometimes it can also experience severe crashes. At this point, I want to share a very important detail, which is entirely my personal opinion. The main reason gold and silver gain value is that people trust them, their supply is limited, and most importantly, they are physical assets. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are not physical, but their limited supply is an absolute mathematical certainty. However, there is one major catch here. During severe economic crises or potential wars, there is always the risk of massive electricity or internet outages. And without electricity or the internet, these crypto assets completely lose their function. Whether you want to take this specific risk is entirely up to you. But despite all these risks and fluctuations, some investors continue to see Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as the unchanging financial system of the future. That's exactly why cryptocurrencies frequently come up in conversations about economic crises in recent years. And I think we will be talking about this topic a lot more in the coming years. 3. Silver usually isn't talked about as much as gold, but it is another highly critical metal that draws attention during crisis periods. Silver has a very interesting feature. It is both an investment metal and an industrial metal. So don't just think of silver as a metal kept in a corner for investment purposes. Silver is found in electronic devices, solar panels, medical equipment, and many technological products in our lives. Therefore, the value of silver is directly affected by two different sources. First, investor demand, and second, industrial production demand. When investors turn to safe assets during crisis periods, silver also gets its share of this flight and benefits from it. Historically, we can see that silver prices make significant upward movements during many economic crises. That's why some investors always keep silver in their portfolios as an alternative asset to gold. But a small detail. Because silver is used so extensively in the industrial field, its price is generally tried to be suppressed and kept lower so as not to increase production costs. 4. Agricultural land. There is only one thing in the world that never changes during economic crises: human needs. People can suddenly cut many expense items during crisis periods. They can give up buying a new car, they might not go on vacation that year, or they might stop eating at luxury restaurants, but they can never give up eating. And that's exactly why food production is the most critical sector under all circumstances, and agricultural lands are always seen as a strategic asset. The world population is constantly growing, and a growing population means a need for much more food. Because of this simple equation, agricultural lands are counted among the assets that can always maintain and even multiply their value in the long run. If you pay attention, some large investment funds and world-famous billionaires have been making massive investments in agricultural lands in recent years, because food production will become much more important in the world of the future. Of course, there is only one condition for the land to appreciate here, and that is the land being in the right and fertile location. 5. Pharmaceuticals and healthcare products. Another area that does not lose its value during economic crises and even becomes much more strategic is pharmaceuticals and healthcare products. As we just said, people can cancel their vacations and give up buying new clothes during crisis periods, but no one can postpone taking their vital medication, because illnesses don't wait for the economy to recover. This unavoidable, mandatory demand makes the healthcare sector one of the most resilient safe harbors against crises. Moreover, because the intense stress, uncertainty, and anxiety brought on by crises trigger psychological problems or various ailments in society, the demand for certain specific drug groups can rise even higher during moments of crisis. And of course, consumers who want to cut costs during these periods turn to cheaper equivalent, namely generic drugs that serve the same function instead of expensive original drugs, heavily mobilizing this side of the market. In short, even if the economy slows down or stops in the world, survival and healthcare needs never stop. 6. Basic food products. During economic crises, people's spending habits inevitably undergo a change. Consumers generally quickly give up buying luxury and expensive products, but the demand for basic necessities continues without slowing down. Products like rice, wheat, flour, or legumes are literally indispensable in people's daily lives. That's why the demand for these products does not decrease even during crisis periods. In fact, in some panic situations, because people start hoarding with a scarcity psychology, the demand for these products can go way above normal. We all remember those famous stocking crises and empty shelves in supermarkets during the pandemic. In many countries, people hoarded pasta, rice, and flour like crazy. This situation we experience shows us very clearly how vital and valuable basic food products are for a society during crisis times. 7. Water and water infrastructure. Another critical area that never loses its value during economic crises, and whose vital importance is understood much more clearly during those moments of panic, is water resources and water infrastructure. Just like agriculture and energy, water is the most basic human need that cannot be postponed or replaced by something else in a lab. No matter how deep the crisis or how high inflation is, people have to continue consuming water and paying those bills to survive. Furthermore, since factors like the growing global population and climate change make access to clean water harder every passing day, companies providing water treatment, water distribution, and infrastructure services are viewed by giant investors as the most defensive and safe assets. In short, even if stock markets crash or currencies turn to dust, clean water must flow from those taps every morning. That's why the value of water and the massive infrastructure that allows us to reach it always remains standing tall against economic fluctuations. 8. Energy resources. We must not forget this. The modern world is built entirely on energy. Cities won't run for even a second without electricity. The massive transportation and logistics system stops instantly without oil, and millions of homes cannot be heated in winter without natural gas. That is exactly why the energy sector is the most strategic sector in the world. Even if some sectors shrink significantly during economic crises, society's energy need does not completely disappear. Even if industrial production slows down and factories cut shifts, overall energy demand does not drop to zero. Therefore, energy resources always continue to remain among the most important assets in the long run. because it is impossible for the wheels of the world economy to turn without oil, natural gas, and electricity production. 9. Addictive products. There is a sociological and interesting fact about economic crises. The demand for some products, rather than falling during crisis periods, can actually show an increase. Products like cigarettes, alcohol, or coffee are consumption items that people have now turned into habits and addictions in their daily lives. Economists call this situation inelastic demand, meaning even if the price of these products constantly goes up, people somehow allocate a budget and continue to consume them. In fact, some research has shown that because society's overall stress and anxiety levels rise during crisis periods, the consumption of such products can increase even more than in normal times. That's why these sectors can remain surprisingly resilient against massive economic fluctuations, and companies can multiply their values. 10. Repair and maintenance services. When an economic crisis breaks out, people's consumer behaviors change instantly. People start spending their money much more carefully, and the biggest change happens in the habit of buying a new one. During a crisis, instead of buying a new product, people continue to use their old products for their maximum lifespan. When a phone breaks, instead of going and buying a new one, they get its screen or battery repaired. When their cars break down or get old, instead of buying a new car from the dealership, they go to the mechanic and get a good maintenance service. That is exactly why repair and maintenance sectors can experience their golden age and gain massive importance during crisis periods. Because until the day the crisis is over, everyone's common goal is to keep their existing belongings alive for as long as possible. Conclusion: economic crises have occurred repeatedly throughout history and will highly likely continue to occur in different forms in the future. But the truly important thing here is not to be scared and hide from crises, but to correctly read and understand their mathematics. Because while some things melt away and lose value during crisis periods, some things retain their value and some things become much more valuable than before. That's why understanding the rules of the economic world helps us make our financial decisions much more consciously, not with panic. If you like this kind of economics and finance content, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Goodbye.